They think about, there's a few things. Like if you're moving for the sake of getting lower taxes, then you also need to think about how to become a tax non-resident. Now, for the American listeners, that's obviously going to be hard. But for non-American listeners, pretty much if you research and you take the right steps, you can do this. So, for example, it may mean closing down bank accounts in the country that you know, that the original in your country that you're from. Maybe selling your car, selling your house, doing like kind of cutting off those other ties so that you can then become a non-resident. Of course, it will be different depending on where you are. So I researched that in terms of how to do that for an Australian. Of course, that will be different as a Swedish citizen or whatever, right? That's one interesting point. I mean, there's lots of things that you have to research, and I guess really one thing you can do is go to these places and trial run, right? Just go and visit for a few weeks and see, like, oh, okay, do I like it here? And what kind of entry pathways are there? So, for example, can I get a visa as a freelancer? Can I get a visa by setting up a business? Can I get a visa by buying a property? Can I buy a passport? These kinds of things. So there's kinds of, or purchase citizenship, which entitles you to a passport in that particular country. A couple of things you can add there is, as part of your research, you can look at what are the countries that would be maybe near me, maybe from a time zone perspective. So let's say you're an American and you're looking at or a Canadian and you're looking at somewhere to go. Maybe you'd look somewhere in LATAM, right? Maybe you would look at Mexico or Colombia or Argentina or somewhere in LATAM, because the time zones line up a bit more easily if you're remote working and your team is also in North America, just as an example. Other things you can do are look at places that have low-cost entry, footholds, right? Let's say can you get a residence permit relatively cheaply? Or can you get can you open bank accounts relatively easily? So those are a few things that you can look at. And then from the tax perspective, you might be looking at, okay, what places have either a low tax rate at the headline level, or look for this thing, are they a territorial tax system? And so if that is a territorial tax system, then they may not tax you on income that's generated outside of that country. Now, important point to note here is it doesn't just mean, just any territorial tax system and I'm good. Because they may say, it depends on the type of work you're doing in the business setup you have, that they may say, okay, let's say I go to country X and it's a territorial tax country, but if I do the work in that country, depending on the interpretation of the tax laws, they may say, no, Stephan, even though it's a territorial tax country and even though your client is outside of the country, you are in that country doing the work in that country, therefore you are taxable. So these are a few little things that you have to sort of figure out, but you can, depending on how your business or how you are as an individual are structured, you can find a way to sort of lower your taxes. Now, of course, that's why in one way it's easy with Dubai, or relatively easy, because it's just zero personal income tax. Now, there is a 9% corporate tax, but even there are free zones and certain exemptions that are available depending on what you do. So, that's just like a bit of an overview. The high-level answer, though, is look for places with low headline rate taxes, or potentially look for places that offer like a territorial tax system where you can have your structure in such a way that allows you to pay less tax.